The Galactic Council chamber was the largest structure ever built by any species in known space. It floated the void between star systems, a monument to cooperation and civilization. Representatives from 400 species gathered here to discuss trade, resolve disputes, and maintain the peace that had lasted for 10,000 years. Today, the chamber was nearly full. Word had spread quickly about the emergency session. Something had happened in human space, and the council needed to address it. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood at the speaking platform, a tiny figure, surrounded by beings that towered over her. The Vithrani delegation sat in their elevated section, their scaled bodies gleaming under the artificial lights. They looked bored. This was a formality, nothing more. The council president, elderly Morvathy with 6 arms and silver-white fur, called the session to order. His voice echoed through the massive chamber. We are gathered to hear testimony regarding the incident at the human colony designated New Harmony. The Vithrani hegemony has filed a territorial claim, and the human delegation has requested this hearing. Ambassador Vasquez, you may speak. Elena looked up at the assembled representatives. 200 years, that was how long humanity had been part of the Galactic conquered. 200 years of quiet acceptance, diplomatic protests, and careful patience. 200 years of being treated as a minor species, worthy of tolerance but not respect. She had prepared a speech. It sat in her tablet, carefully worded to express concern while remaining diplomatic. She had written it 3 days ago, before she had seen the final casualty reports. 12 million dead. The Vithrani fleet had arrived at New Harmony without warning, they claimed. The system fell within their ancient mining rights that predated human expansion into the region. The colony had been there for 60 years. 3 generations of families had been born on that world. The Vithrani gave them 6 hours to evacuate, 6 hours to move 12 million people. When the deadline passed, they opened fire. Elena set her tablet aside. She would not be reading the prepared speech. Council President, she said, her voice steady. Before I make my statement, I wish to read something into the record. The president nodded. You may proceed. Elena pulled out a different tablet. This one contained a list, a very long list. Amara Singh, age 7, Thomas Chen, age 42, Fema Al-Hassan, age 3 months. The chamber grew quiet. Roberto Vasquez, age 68, Yuki Tanaka, age 23, David Okonkwo, age 11, the Vithrani ambassador, shifted in his seat. This was unexpected. Maria Santos, age 35, James Wilson, age 4, Aisha Patel, age 19. Elena continued reading, name after name, age after age. The representatives began to grow uncomfortable. Some checked their communication devices. Others whispered to their aides. The Vithrani ambassador gestured impatiently. Council President, he interrupted. Surely this is not necessary. We acknowledge that there were casualties during the territorial correction. We have already offered compensation. Elna did not stop. Her voice remained calm and clear as she continued down the list. Henrik Johansson, age 57, Chen Wei, age 8, Alawasu Nadami, age 29. The president looked uncomfortable but did not intervene. The rules of the council allowed any species to speak during their designated time, and Elena had barely begun. Hours passed. the chamber emptied and filled again as representatives cycled through there. Schedule, some species left entirely, leaving aides to record the proceedings. The Vithrani ambassador eventually stopped trying to interrupt, he said in increasingly obvious annoyance as the human woman continued her list. Sophia Martinez, age 16, Raj Kapoor, age 44. Emma Lindquist, age 2, 6 hours, Alina. Read names for 6 hours straight. The same amount of time the Vithrani had given for an impossible evacuation when she finally reached the end of the list. Her voice was hoarse but steady. The chamber had grown silent. Those who remained were watching with a mixture of confusion and discomfort. This was not how galactic diplomacy worked. Speeches were supposed to be brief, formal, carefully neutral. Alina set down the tablet. 12,437,812. She said that is the number of human beings who were alive 1 week ago. Children, parents, grandparents, workers, and artists and teachers and farmers. People who had built lives on a world that was their home. She looked up at the Vithrani delegation. The Vithrani hegemony calls this a territorial correction. They have offered us compensation in the form of mining rights to a barren moon. They believe this matter is closed. The Vithrani ambassador stood. The hegemony has acted within its legal rights. The territorial claims are documented. The compensation is generous. What more does this minor species want? Alelina let the silence stretch for a long moment. The human collective formally declares a state of war against the Vithrani hegemony. The chamber erupted. Representatives shouted in a dozen languages. The translation system struggled to keep up. The Vithrani ambassador actually laughed, a harsh, barking sound that echoed through the chaos. War, he said when the noise died down. You are declaring war on us. Do you have any understanding of what you are saying? The hegemony controls 47 star systems. We have a fleet of 8,000 warships. What do you have? A handful of trading vessels and a few dozen patrol boats. Other delegates joined in the laughter. The karate who had once charged humans triple the standard rates for translation technology. The Melian syndicate who had blocked human expansion into 3 separate sectors. The Torveth collective who routinely denied humans entry to their space stations, all of them laughing at the idea that humanity would fight. Alina waited for the laughter to fade. When she spoke again, her voice was quiet but carried to every corner of the chamber. You asked what humanity wants. I have told you we want war. She gathered her materials and stepped down from the platform. The human delegation rose and followed her toward the exit. Every human in the chamber, diplomats and aides, and support staff walked out without looking back. The laughter continued for a few moments, then slowly died away. Dot in the corner of the chamber, largely unnoticed, said the Korvathi delegation. They were historians, not politicians. Their species had survived for 100,000 years by watching, recording, and learning from the mistakes of others. They rarely spoke in council sessions. They simply observed. Elder historian Verth turned to his colleague, his weathered face troubled. Pull the human archives, he said. Quietly, all of them, everything from their home world history. His colleague looked confused. Why? They are a minor species. Their history is barely worth cataloging. Verth shook his head slowly. I have been watching that woman's eyes. Not once did she look away, not once did her voice shake. She read the names of 12 million dead, and she did not weep. She did not plead, she simply recorded them. So she is cold, emotionless. That is not unusual among diplomats. No, Ver said, that is not what I saw. I saw grief, I saw rage, but I also saw something else, something I have seen only in species that are truly dangerous. He paused. I saw patience. I saw someone who has been waiting for this moment, someone who was ready. His colleagues still look skeptical. They have no fleet. Their technology is decades behind the major powers. What could they possibly do? Ver stood, his ancient bones creaking. That is what I intend to find out. I want to know everything about their wars, every conflict in their history, every battle they have ever fought, their internal conflicts. Those were primitive squabbles over resources, surely not relevant to galactic warfare. Ver fixed his colleague with a steady gaze. A species that destroys its own kind with such enthusiasm might be capable of anything. And I want to know what we are dealing with before it is too late. 3 days later, the human delegation had departed from every council station and embassy. Human trading vessels vanished from ports across the galaxy. Human workers quietly collected their belongings and left. Human businesses closed without explanation, their assets liquidated and their staff withdrawn. The V-Thrani hegemony dispatched a punitive fleet of 400 warships. They expected to reach Earth within a month, crush the human resistance, and end this embarrassment quickly. The other powers of the galaxy watched with mild interest. It would be a short war, everyone agreed. The humans had made a mistake, an emotional outburst that would be quickly corrected. Only the Corvathi continued their research. As they dug deeper into human history, their concern grew. They found records of conflicts that dwarfed anything in galactic history. Not wars between species, but wars between human nations. Millions dead, tens of millions, entire continents devastated. And most disturbing of all, they found that humans had developed weapons capable of destroying their own world. Not once, but many times over. They had lived for generations with the power to annihilate themselves, and they had survived very into the night. When he finished, he sat alone in his study, staring at the stars. What kind of species, he whispered to himself, learns to love the fire that could consume them? He did not sleep that night. He was too busy preparing a warning that he suspected would arrive too late. 3 weeks had passed since the human declaration of war. The galaxy watched with amusement as humanity prepared to fight a power that outnumbered them in every way that mattered. The betting pools on various stations favored the V-Thrani by margins too large to calculate. Most predicted the war would be over before the V-Thrani fleet even reached Earth. Elder historian Verth had spent those 3 weeks buried in archives. He had not slept properly. He had barely eaten. His colleagues had begun to worry about his mental state, but Verith had discovered something that kept him awake with a fear he had never known before. Today he stood before a small gathering in a private chamber on the Corvathi home world. The audience was carefully selected, senior diplomats from neutral species, military advisors who understood strategy, historians like himself who had studied the rise and fall of civilizations. Thank you for coming, Verth said. His voice was tired, but steady. What I'm about to share will be difficult to believe. I ask only that you listen before you judge. He activated the display behind him. A blue and green world appeared, beautiful and fragile. This is Earth, the human home world. It is a small planet, smaller than most species prefer. The gravity is moderate. The atmosphere is thin. By galactic standards, it is an unremarkable world. He changed the display. Now it showed a timeline stretching back hundreds of thousands of years. Humans have existed as a distinct species for approximately 300,000 years. They developed advanced civilization. Roughly 10,000 years ago, they discovered nuclear power. Less than 400 years before making first contact with us, one of the diplomats, a Morellian with shimmering scales, looked bored. We know all this. Human history is taught in basic education. They are a young species with limited development. What is your point? Ver nodded slowly. My point is that everything we have been taught about humans is wrong, not inaccurate. Wrong deliberately or accidentally. We have built our understanding on a false foundation. He changed the display again. Now it showed numbers, casualty figures, death tolls. Humans call this the First World War. It was a conflict that lasted for years, fought between human nations on their home world. The death toll was approximately 20 million. The room was silent. 4 years later they fought again. This conflict, called the Second World War, lasted 6 years. The death toll was between 70 and 80 million. That number includes civilians who were deliberately targeted. Entire cities were destroyed. Industries were converted entirely to weapons production. Every resource was directed toward victory. The Melian diplomat had stopped looking bored. 70 million, that is impossible. No species would inflict such losses on itself. The records are clear, Ver said, and I have not yet mentioned the weapons. He changed the display. Now it showed an explosion, a mushroom cloud rising into a darkened sky. Near the end of the Second War, humans developed a weapon capable of destroying an entire city in a single blast. They called it a nuclear bomb. Within decades, they had built enough of these weapons to destroy their own world many times over. Then why are they still here? Another diplomat asked. Because they chose not to use them. They lived for generations under the constant threat of total annihilation. They built shelters. They trained their children what to do if the bombs fell. They developed entire philosophies around the idea of mutual destruction. And somehow, against all logic, they did not press the button. Ver paused to let this sink in. We have studied thousands of species throughout galactic history. Many have developed weapons of mass destruction. Almost all of them either destroyed themselves or were conquered by others before they could recover. Humans are the only species we have found that developed the capacity for total self-destruct and then lived with it generation after generation until they grew beyond it. The room was very quiet now, but surely a military advisor said slowly, "This was long ago. They have been at peace since joining the conquered. They have shown no signs of such violence." Ver smiled without humor. Have they, or have they simply been waiting? He changed the display again. Now it showed star charts, human territory mapped over the past 200 years. When humans first joined the conquered, they controlled one system, their fleet. consisted of 6 ships, all converted. Civilian vessels, they had no manufacturing capacity, no military infrastructure, no significant resources. He highlighted different regions as he spoke. Over the past 2 centuries, humanity has expanded slowly. They claimed systems that no one else wanted. They established colonies in regions considered too remote or too poor to be valuable. They built trading posts and mining operations throughout the outer rim. All of this is known, the Myrlian said impatiently. They are traders and miners, nothing more. That is what they wanted us to believe. Ver zoomed in on one of the human systems. 3 months ago, one of our research vessels passed through the system. It was considered a minor human mining operation. Our sensors detected nothing unusual. He paused. Last week I sent a deep space probe to the same system. Look at what it found. The display changed to show sensor readings. Hidden in the asteroid fields were structures. Large structures, shipyards, manufacturing plants, defense platforms that had been invisible to standard scans. We found similar installations in 17 other systems, all human territory, all hidden, all completely invisible to casual observation. Verith's voice dropped lower. They have been building, my friends, for decades, perhaps for centuries, an entire military infrastructure hidden in plain sight. The military advisor leaned forward. How large we cannot be certain. Our probes were detected and destroyed before they could complete their surveys, but based on the data we gathered, their fleet is not a handful of trading vessels. It is not a few dozen patrol boats. Ver met the advisor's eyes. It is thousands of warships, perhaps tens of thousands, all of them built to specifications we do not recognize. The room erupted in conversation. Diplomats turned to each other, speaking rapidly in a dozen languages. The military advisor was already accessing his own communication device, sending urgent messages. Vera waited for the noise to die down. There is more. Our analysis of human behavior over the past 2 centuries shows a clear pattern. Every insult they endured, every restriction placed upon them, every time they were denied equal treatment, they recorded all of it. They remembered all of it, and they used the anger to fuel their preparations. But why, the Myrlian asked, why prepare for war if they never intended to start one? Because they did not want war. They wanted peace, but they understood something that we have forgotten. Ver turned to face the window, looking out at the stars. Peace is not the absence of conflict. Peace is the presence of strength so great that no one dares to break it. Humans have a saying: if you want peace, prepare for war. He turned back to face the gathering. For 200 years we treated them as inferiors. We laughed at them, we exploited them, we assumed that because they did not fight, they could not fight. We were wrong. Communication devices in the room began buzzing simultaneously. Everyone checked their messages. The Vithrani punitive fleet had reached the first human border system. What did they find? Someone asked. Verith checked his own device. The report was brief. Nothing. The system is empty. No human ships, no resistance. The stations have been abandoned. The Melian diplomat smiled with relief. Then they are running. They know they cannot win. But Verith shook his head slowly. His face had gone pale. You do not understand. This is what humans do before they truly fight. They clear the field, they remove anything. They do not want destroyed. They create empty space where only the enemy remains. He looked at the report again, then at the faces around him. Vithrani fleet is advancing into a trap, and I fear that by the time they realize it, there will be no one left to retreat far across the galaxy. Fleet Commander Vor of the Vithrani hegemony stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the empty stars. His fleet of 400 warships moved through human space. Unopposed, station after station sat, dark and abandoned, system after system held nothing but silence. His officers called it a victory. They laughed at the human cowardice. They sent reports home, promising that Earth would fall within the week. But Vorath was old enough to remember other wars he had fought, species that had seemed weak until the moment they struck. He had learned to distrust easy victories. Something is wrong, he said quietly to his second in command. This is too simple. They have no fleet. His second replied, our scouts have confirmed it. The humans are running. Vorath stared at the star charts somewhere ahead. Humanity waited. He could feel it in his bones. Something was watching them advance. Something was counting their ships, measuring their strength, calculating their weaknesses. Double the sensor range, he ordered, and have all ships report any unusual readings, no matter how minor. His second looked confused, but obeyed. The fleet moved forward, deeper into the silence. They did not know that they had already been surrounded. They did not know that human ships running dark and cold had been tracking them since they crossed the border. They did not know that somewhere in the void ahead, a human admiral was watching their approach with patient, ancient eyes. The Vithrani fleet sailed toward destiny, and destiny was weighty. Fleet Commander Vorath had been a warrior for 60 years. He had fought in 7 major conflicts. He had seen species rise and fall. He had learned to trust his instincts, and right now his instincts were screaming. The soul system lay ahead. Earth, the human home world. His fleet of 400 warships had crossed human space without resistance. Now they would end this embarrassing war with a single decisive strike. All ships report ready. His second in command announced, we will enter the system. 15 minutes. Vorath nodded slowly. His flagship, the Eternal Dominion, led the formation. Behind him spread the might of the hegemony, enough firepower to crack a planet's crust, enough soldiers to occupy a dozen worlds. Begin final approach, he ordered. The fleet accelerated toward the distant star. Sensors swept the space ahead, searching for any sign of resistance. They found nothing, just empty void and the cold light of Sol. Then the alarms began. Contact, his sensor officer shouted. Multiple contacts emerging from everywhere. The display lit up with red icons. Ships were appearing all around them, not from the direction of Earth, from the asteroid fields, from the outer planets, from the dark spaces between worlds where nothing should exist. Vor stared at the tactical display, his confidence shattered in a single moment. How many, he whispered. His sensor officer was pale, still counting. 2,000. 3,000, still emerging. The human fleet was not hiding behind Earth. The human fleet was everywhere. They had been waiting in the darkness, running cold and silent, invisible to Vithrani sensors, and now they were activating their systems, lighting up like stars. Being born, all ships combat formation. Voreth bellowed, raise shields power. Weapons, but the humans were already moving. Their ships were not like anything in the Vithrani database. They were sleek and angular, built for speed and power. They moved with a coordination that spoke of decades of training, and their weapons the first volley tore through of a Throni cruiser. Like it was made of paper, the shields that should have held for minutes failed in seconds. The armor that should have absorbed the blow simply ceased to exist. Return fire, Voreth ordered. All batteries return fire. His fleet responded. Thousands of weapons lit up the void. Energy beams and missiles streak toward the human ships, but the humans were not there anymore. They had already moved, sliding through space with impossible grace. The Vithrani weapons struck empty darkness. They are too fast, his tactical officer said, his voice shaking. Our targeting systems cannot track them. Another salvo from the humans. 3 more Vithrani ships died, then 5 more, then 10. Voreth watched his fleet being destroyed and understood that everything he had believed was a lie. The humans were not weak. They had never been weak. They had simply been waiting on the bridge of the human flagship Prometheus. Admiral Sarah Chen watched the battle unfold. Her face was calm, almost serene. She had prepared for this moment for 30 years. Her entire career had been building toward this single engagement. Vithrani formation is breaking, her tactical officer reported. They are trying to retreat. Do not let them, Chen replied. Pursuit force engage. Main fleet continue. Assault pattern Delta. Her ships moved like wolves hunting deer. The Vithrani fled in every direction, but there was nowhere to run. Human forces had positioned themselves to cut off every escape route. The trap had been set with perfect precision. Shen thought about the reports from New Harmony. 12 million dead, families wiped out in an afternoon, children who had been playing in their gardens when the bombardment began. She did not hate the Vithrani. Hatred was not useful, but she would not let them escape. Not this time. This time there would be consequences. Admiral, her communications officer said, the Vithrani flagship is signaling. They are requesting terms of surrender. Chen considered for a moment. Open a channel. Fleet Commander Voreth's face appeared on her display. He looked older than his years, broken by what he had witnessed. Human commander, he said, his voice heavy with defeat. We did not understand. Please, we surrender. Stop the killing. Chen looked at him without expression. You are offering unconditional surrender. Yes, yes. Anything, just stop. Very well. Order your remaining ships to power down their weapons and lower their shields. Any ship that fails to comply within 5 minutes will be destroyed. Voreth nodded quickly and began issuing orders. One by one, the surviving Vithrani ships went dark, their weapons powered down. Their shields fell. Of the 400 ships that had entered the Sol system, fewer than 100 remained. Chen turned to her tactical officer. Secure the surviving vessels. Take the crew's prisoner. Treat them according to the conventions. Her officer looked surprised. We are taking prisoners after what they did to New Harmony. We are not them, Chen said. Simply, we do not slaughter the defenseless. We do not murder those who have surrendered. That is the difference between us. She looked back at the display, at the debris fields that had once been enemy warships. That has always been the difference. News of the Battles spread across the galaxy within hours. The reports were met with disbelief. 400 Vthrani warships destroyed or captured. Human losses 47 ships. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session. The Vthrani representative was no longer laughing. He stood before the assembled delegates and begged for assistance. He invoked mutual defense treaties. He called upon ancient alliances. The other species hesitated. They were watching human broadcasts now, not just the battle footage but everything: military parades through human cities, fleet reviews showing thousands of warships, training exercises involving millions of soldiers. The humans had been hiding their strength for the centuries. Now they were showing everything, and what they showed was terrifying. The hegemony demands support. The Vthrani representative shouted, "We have treaties, we have agreements. You are obligated to fight beside us." The karate delegation remained silent. They had read Vareth's reports. They knew what the humans were capable of. The Melian representative finally spoke. "Our treaties do not require us to commit suicide. The hegemony started this war by attacking a human colony without provocation. You created this enemy. You deal with them." Other species nodded in agreement. One by one, the Vthrani's allies turned away. They would not fight. They would not sacrifice their own ships against a power that had just destroyed a major fleet with minimal losses. The Vthrani representative stood alone, abandoned by everyone who had once called him ally. Far from the council chambers, human forces were advancing, not recklessly, not with the chaos that characterized most galactic conflicts. Their movement was methodical, careful, precise. They did not bomb civilian targets. They did not destroy infrastructure. When they captured a world, they immediately began providing humanitarian aid to the population: food, medical supplies, clean water. The Vthrani citizens were confused. They had been told that humans were savage, violent, barely civilized. They had expected atrocities. Instead, they found soldiers who helped clear rubble and doctors who treated the wounded regardless of SPCA. Vthrani elder approached a human captain in one of the occupied cities. The captain was overseeing the distribution of food supplies. "Why are you doing this?" the elder asked. "We are your enemies. Our fleet killed millions of your people." The captain looked at him for a long moment. "Your fleet did that. Your government ordered it. You did not. These children did not. These families did not." She gestured at the civilians gathering around the distribution point. "We did not come here for revenge. We came here to end a war that your leaders started. We came here to make sure it never happens again, but we will not become monsters to do it. We will not become what we are fighting against." Elder studied her face, searching for deception. He found none. "I do not understand you," he said finally. "Any other species would burn our worlds. They would enslave our people. They would take everything." The captain smiled slightly. "Then you understand why we are different. We have had the power to destroy for a long time. We learned the hard way that destruction is easy. Building is hard. Hate is easy. Forgiveness is hard. We choose the hard path because the easy path leads nowhere good." She returned to her work, leaving the elder standing in confusion. In his study on the Korvathi home world, elder historian Vareth read the reports From the front lines, he had expected. Human victories, he had not expected. Human mercy, his colleagues sat across. From him, equally bewildered, they could take everything, his colleagues said. The Vithrani are broken, their fleet is gone. Their government is collapsing, humanity could claim their entire territory and no one would stop them. Ver nodded. Slowly, but they do not want territory. They never did. They want something else, something more valuable. What? Vera thought about the names Ella Vasquez had read in the council chamber. 12 million names, 12 million reasons for hate. They want recognition. He said, they want the galaxy to see them as they truly are, not as weak, not as violent, but as something in between. Something new. He looked out at the stars. They want us to understand that strength and mercy can exist together. That a species can be capable of devastating war and still choose peace. That is what they are fighting for, not 6 months into the war, the Vithrani hegemony was dying, not quickly, not dramatically, but steadily, inevitably. Like a great tree rotting from within. Human forces had not invaded their worlds or slaughtered their populations. Instead, they had done something far more effective. They had dismantled the hegemony's ability to fight. Shipyards destroyed in precise strikes that killed. No workers. Supply lines cut by fleets that appeared and vanished like ghosts. Manufacturing worlds blockaded so completely that nothing moved without human permission. The great war machine of the hegemony had been taken apart, piece by piece, with surgical precision. That left the civilian population untouched. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the Prometheus, reviewing the latest reports. Her fleet had grown. During the campaign, human ships from distant colonies had arrived to join the fight. Volunteers from occupied territories had offered support. Even a few alien species quietly and unofficially had provided intelligence. The Vithrani Third Fleet has surrendered. Her tactical officer reported. That is the last of their major formations. Chen nodded. And the civilian casualties? Minimal. Our blockade is holding. Food shipments are being distributed according to need, not politics. Humanitarian situation is stable. This was the strange nature of the war. Humans were winning decisively, completely, but they were not destroying. They were not conquering. They were simply removing the Vithrani's ability to threaten anyone ever again. Admiral, her communications officer, said, we are receiving reports from Vithrani Prime. There is some kind of commotion in the capital. Shen turned to the main display. News feeds from the hegemony's home world showed crowds in the streets, not the usual displays of loyalty that authoritarian states demanded. These crowds were angry. They carried signs demanding the resignation of the government. They chanted for peace. The population is turning. Her intelligence officer said the government promised them a quick victory over a weak enemy. Instead, their fleet is gone, their economy is collapsing, and human soldiers are feeding their citizens better than their own leaders did. Chen watched the footage in silent. She saw Vithrani citizens helping to tear down propaganda display. She saw soldiers refusing orders to fire on protesters. She saw the first cracks forming in a regime that had ruled for 1,000 years. This is what we were waiting for, she said quietly, not military victory. This 3 days later, the Vithrani government fell. The military officers who had ordered the attack on New Harmony were arrested by their own people, the politicians who had approved the massacre were dragged from their offices. A new provisional government formed its first active request for peace negotiations. The galaxy watched in astonishment. Wars did not end this way. Conquerors did not accept surrender when they could take everything, and yet the human response was immediate and positive. Ambassador Elelina Vasquez announced that humanity was ready to talk, but there was another matter to address first. On a remote moon in the outer reaches of Vithrani space, human forces had discovered something that changed everything. Labor camp. Officially it was a mining operation. Unofficially it was a prison where humans had been worked to death for decades. The camp had held workers from human trading vessels that had disappeared over the years, crews that had been reported lost in accidents or pirate attacks. In truth, they had been captured and enslaved, forced to mine valuable minerals in conditions that slowly killed them. When the human soldiers arrived, they found survivors. Not many, perhaps 1,000 out of the tens of thousands who had been imprisoned there over the years. The survivors were thin, scarred, broken in ways that would never fully heal. Soldiers who found them were changed by what they saw. Hardened warriors wept openly. Officers who had maintained perfect composure through months of battle stood speechless before the evidence of systematic cruelty. One soldier, a young woman named Private Maria Santos, recognized a name on the camp's memorial wall. Her grandfather. He had been a merchant captain who had disappeared when she was a child. The family had been told his ship was destroyed by an engine failure. The truth was worse. She stood before the wall for a long time reading the names of the dead. When her captain approached, she did not move. "Stows," he said gently. "We need to process the cite evidence for the tribunals." "They knew," she said, her voice flat. "The hegemony knew these people were here. They kept them as slaves. They worked them to death for profit." The captain put a hand on her shoulder. "I know, and they will answer for it, not with more death but with truth. The galaxy will see what they did. History will record it." Santos turned to look at him. Her eyes were dry, but something burned behind them. "Is that enough? Is truth enough?" The captain thought about the question seriously before answering. "No, truth is never enough by itself, but it is where we start. Without truth, there can be no justice. Without justice, there can be no peace. We build one on top of the other like layers of stone." He looked around at the camp, at the guards being taken into custody, at the survivors being loaded onto medical ships. Our ancestors learned this lesson the hard way. They built systems that were supposed to deliver justice, and those systems failed. They tried again. They failed again, but they kept trying because they understood something important. He met her eyes. "The goal is not to be perfect. The goal is to be better, better than we were yesterday, better than those who came before." Santos looked back at the wall of names one more time, then she straightened her shoulders and picked up her weapon. "Let us be better." Then she said, "Let us show them what humans do when they find something like this." Word of the labor camp spread quickly. Human journalists broadcast the footage across the galaxy. Vithrani citizens watched in horror as the truth about their government was revealed. Many had not known, some had suspected but looked away. Now there was No looking away, the new Vithrani. Government acted quickly, they opened all records related to human prisoners. They identified the officials who had authorized the camps. They began trials that would last for years, and they sent a peace delegation to meet with humanity. The delegation traveled on a human warship surrounded by the fleet. They had defeated them. They expected to be humiliated. They expected demands for territory, resources, the total subjugation of their species. Admiral Chen met them at the airlock. She was polite but distant, professional but not friendly. She escorted them to a conference room where Ambassador Vasquez was waiting. The Vithrani delegation was led by an elderly female named Korath. She had been a minor official in the old government, known for her moderate views. Now she was the face of the new regime. Admiral, Ambassador, she bowed her head. Respectfully, we come to discuss terms of peace. Vasquez gestured for them to sit. We are ready to listen. Korath took a deep breath. This was the moment her people had been dreading, the moment when humanity would reveal its true demands. We are prepared to offer significant concessions, she said. Carefully, territory, resources, economic rights. We understand that you have the power to take whatever you want. We ask only that you consider the well-being of our civilian population. Vasquez studied her for a long moment. You misunderstand our intentions, she said finally. We do not want your territory. We do not want your resources. We have no interest in ruling your people. Korath looked confused. Then what do you want? Chen spoke for the first time. We want to never have this conversation again with you or anyone else. We want to live in peace as equals without fear that our colonies will be destroyed because someone considers us inferior. She leaned forward. We want three things. First, full recognition of humanity as an equal member of galactic civilization, not a minor species, not a junior partner. Equal. Second, reparations for the families of those killed at New Harmony and in your labor camps, not territory. Money, resources enough to rebuild their lives. Third, war criminals must face justice, not human justice, an independent tribunal with representatives from neutral species. The galaxy must see that such actions have consequences. Kor stared at her. That is all. Vasquez nodded. There is one more thing, a formal apology. Read before the Galactic Council, broadcast to every world in known space, an acknowledgement of what was done and a promise that it will never happen again. The Vithrani delegation sat in stunned silence. You could take everything, Kor said finally. You could enslave us as we enslaved your people. You could destroy our worlds as we destroyed New Harmony. Why do you not? Vasquez looked at her with something that might have been pity. Because we are not you. We never were. We spent a centuries letting you believe we were weak. We spent a centuries preparing for a war we hoped would never come, and when we finally fought, we proved that we could destroy you completely. She paused. But victory is not about destruction. Victory is about building something better. We want peace, real peace, the kind that lasts. That kind of peace cannot be built on conquest. It can only be built on justice, on truth, on mutual respect. Kor was silent for a long moment. Then she bowed her head. You are a strange species, she said quietly. You are the most dangerous enemy we have ever faced. And yet you are also the most merciful. She met Vasquez's eyes. We accept your terms, all of them, and speaking for myself and not my government, I hope that one day we can understand Galactic. Council chamber had never been so full. Every species with membership had sent representatives, those without membership crowded into the observation galleries, news drones from 1,000 worlds hovered in approved positions, broadcasting to billions of viewers across known space. Today was the day. The war would officially end. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood at the speaking platform, the same place where she had read the names of the new Harmony dead. That had been 9 months ago, 9 months of war, of revelation, of change. Now she stood in silence, waiting for the ceremony to begin. The V-Thrani delegation entered through the main doors. Ambassador Korath led them, walking slowly but with dignity. Behind her came military officers, government officials, and one very old V-Thrani who had been identified as a survivor of the camps. He walked with the help of a human soldier who supported his frail body. The council president called the session to order. His voice was subdued, appropriate for the gravity of the occasion. We are gathered to witness the formal end of hostilities between the human collective and the V-Thrani hegemony. Ambassador Korath will now read the statement agreed upon by both parties. Cora stepped to the platform. She held a tablet in her hands, but she did not look at it. She had memorized every word. To the peoples of the galaxy, she began, her voice clear and steady. I speak today on behalf of the V-Thrani hegemony, on behalf of our government, our military, and our citizens. I speak with shame, with regret, and with the first steps toward hope. The chamber was absolutely silent. 9 months ago, the hegemony ordered an attack on the human colony of New Harmony. This attack was unprovoked. It was unjustified. It was in the clearest terms a war crime. 12 million human beings died because our government believed they could act without consequence. 12 million lives ended because we saw humanity as weak, as inferior, as unworthy of the same respect we demanded for ourselves. Her voice trembled slightly, but she continued, we were wrong in every way. That matters. We were wrong, not only about human strength, which they have demonstrated beyond any doubt, but about human character, about their values, about what kind of species they truly are. She paused, gathering herself. When humanity fought back, they did not seek to destroy us. When they won, they did not seek to conquer us. They had every right to take revenge. They had the power to eliminate our species entirely. Instead, they chose mercy. They chose justice. They chose to build peace rather than perpetuate violence. Korath looked around the chamber at the assembled representatives. I stand before you today to offer what humanity asked for, not territory, not tribute, not submission. They asked only for the truth. She took a deep breath. V-Thrani hegemony murdered 12 million innocent people. We enslaved thousands more in hidden camps. We treated humanity with contempt and cruelty for the centuries, and when they finally said enough, we laughed at them. Tears were flowing down her face now, but she did not stop. We were fools. We were worse than fools. We were monsters who called ourselves civilized, and humanity, the species we called primitive, showed us what civilization truly means. She turned to face the human delegation directly. On behalf of the V-Thrani people, I offer our deepest Apology, not because we were defeated, not because we fear further punishment, but because we finally understand what we did. We understand the lives we destroyed. We understand the pain we caused, and we are sorry, truly, genuinely sorry. The old Vithrani who had survived the camp stepped forward. He had asked to speak, and both delegations had agreed. I was a prisoner for 40 years. He said, his voice weak but clear. I watched friends die. I lost hope. I believed I would never see my family again, and I was right. They had passed before I was freed. He looked at the human soldiers who had escorted him. When the humans came to the camp, I expected death, or worse. I had been taught that humans were animals, savage and cruel. Instead, they gave me food. They gave me medicine. A young soldier helped me walk for the first time in years. He turned to face the council. I do not understand humanity. I do not know how a species can suffer what they suffered and choose forgiveness, but I have seen it with my own eyes. I have felt it in their hands, and I believe now that they are what they claim to be. A species that wants only peace. Species that could have crushed us but chose to lift us up instead. Ambassador Vasquez stepped forward as the old Vithrani finished. She did not carry notes. She did not need them. The human collective accepts the apology of the Vithrani hegemony. She said simply, we accept the terms of peace. We accept the promise of change. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of representatives from species that had exploited humanity for generations. But let me be clear about something. We did not fight this war for revenge. We did not fight to prove our strength, though we have proven it. We did not fight to dominate, though we could. Her voice hardened slightly. We fought because 12 million people deserve to be remembered. We fought because centuries of insults and exploitation had to end. We fought because we finally understood that no one would give us respect. We had to take it. She paused. Now we have it. Now every species in this galaxy knows what humanity can do. Now they understand that attacking us has consequences. That is what we wanted. That is what we achieved. Her expression softened. But that is not all we want. We want partners, not subjects. We want allies, not servants. We want to build something together, all of us, that will last longer than any empire based on conquest. She gestured at the human delegation behind her. We have spent centuries preparing for war. Now we want to spend centuries building peace. Real peace, the kind where every species, no matter how small or young, is treated with dignity. The kind where disputes are resolved with words, not weapons. The kind where children on every world can look up at the stars without fear. She extended her hand toward Korath. War is over. Let something better begin. Korath took her hand. The chamber erupted in applause that lasted for minutes. In the months that followed, the galaxy changed slowly at first, then with gathering speed. The Vithrani hegemony kept its promises. Where criminals faced trial, reparations flowed to victims' families, and for the first time in Vithrani history, their government began treating other species as equals. Other powers watched and learned. Some changed their behavior voluntarily. Others changed when they saw what had happened to the hegemony. Either way, humanity's message had been received. Attack us and you will face consequences. Treat us fairly and you will find no better friend. The Corvi published their research on human History, it became required reading in. Diplomatic me's across the galaxy. Species that had dismissed humans as primitives now studied there. Civilization with intense interest. How had they survived so many self-inflicted catastrophes? How had they emerged from the nuclear age not just alive but stronger? What could others learn from their journey? Admiral Chen retired from military service and took up teaching. Her students came from a dozen species, all eager to learn human strategic thinking. She taught them about patience, about preparation, about the importance of fighting only when necessary. She taught them that the greatest victory was the one that made future wars unnecessary. Ambassador Vasquez remained in diplomatic service for another decade. She negotiated treaties, resolved disputes, and slowly built the framework for a new kind of galactic community. When she finally retired, she was known as the architect of the long peace. The war had lasted less than a year. Its consequences would last for centuries. On the first anniversary of the peace, a memorial was completed on New Harmony. The world had been left untouched since the attack, a silent testament to what had been lost. Now a simple structure rose from the ruins, a wall of names, 12 million names. Elena Vasquez attended the dedication. She was older now, her hair gray, her movements slower, but her eyes were still sharp as she walked along the wall, touching the names of the dead. She stopped at a section near the middle. Vasquez, her cousin, her cousin's children, her cousin's grandchildren, and clears throat. Entire branch of her family erased in an afternoon. She stood there for a long time, remembering a young Vithrani approached her hesitantly. She was part of the first generation born after the war, raised in a society that was trying to change. Ambassador, she said quietly, I wanted to tell you, my people, we are trying, we are teaching our children differently. We are trying to become what you showed us we could be. Vasquez looked at her for a moment. The young Vithrani saw something in the old woman's eyes, pain, grief, the weight of 12 million souls. But then Vasquez smiled. It was a tired smile, but genuine. That is all we ever wanted, she said. That is why we fought. Not for conquest, not for revenge. For this. She gestured at the memorial, at the stars above, at the young Vithrani standing before her. For a future where this never happens again. For a galaxy where my cousin's great-grandchildren might have played with yours. The young Vithrani bowed her head. We will not forget. We will never forget. Neither will we, Vasquez said. That is the deal we made. You remember what you did. We remember who we lost. And together we build something big.